Hey, it's Corey with Reel Filmmaking, and today I'm going to give you 3 tips to help up your composition game for your next film shoot. So what actually is composition? To put it simply, composition is what your picture or what your film looks like when you're all said and done. Gosh, why do all my videos suck and they just don't look good and whatever, Man, you gotta get it together. You need some composure in your life. So composition is the makeup of how things look and combined with the aesthetics. You know what? Rather than bore you with all those fun and interesting details, I'm going to give you some practical tips of what you can do to actually understand composition. Composition is essentially how you choose to frame, how you choose to stage whatever you're taking video or picture of. So today, these tips will help you if you're just starting out or you're just looking for a shakeup of things you can do to help spice up your composition game, or if you're just getting started, where to even begin. So point number 1 that we want to look at is the rule of thirds. So the rule of thirds, to put it simply, is a formula that divides your frame, whether you're taking photos or videos, into thirds. You have 2 lines that run from the top of your frame to the bottom vertically, like this, and then you have 2 lines that run horizontally across your frame like this. I don't think I actually went all the way across the frame. Now I did. I'm kind of almost there. After dividing your frame like this, the rule of thirds says that essentially things of the most focal interest, so like what you want people to look at in your picture or in your movie, you put them along the intersections of those lines. So let's say, for example, I want someone really to focus on my hand. Right now, it's in the middle of the frame, so I would move it more to about right here. That would be where one of those intersections is. I have a couple examples I'm going to show you guys, and hopefully this will help you in understanding how you could use this practically when you're shooting something. Alright, so our first rule that we're looking at is dealing with the rule of thirds. So like I said, you want to imagine a grid, 2 lines running from the top of the frame to the bottom of the frame, and 2 lines running across your frame horizontally that split up your frame into thirds. And a lot of the rule entails us putting the most interesting aspects of whatever we're shooting into those places. So right now we have this awesome Spider-Man mug that is cool and I like a lot, but we're trying to frame it in a very interesting way. So right now it's kind of mostly dead center in the frame. There's nothing wrong with this picture. It's not the best, but it's fine. But if we apply the rule of thirds and we move the camera ever so slightly so that we put the Spider-Man mug more to the right side of the frame so that it sits where the points intersect, all of a sudden the frame opens up and it just feels more right. There's more space, there's a leading room, breathing room as some people would put it, over on the left side of the frame, and things just feel more correct. So this is a great example of how the rule of thirds, and just even on most cameras you can set it so it displays the 3x3 grid, and you can just practice putting things like, okay, where does this fall in the rule of thirds? If I move it over here, it's going to look a lot better than here. And you can try different things, you know. Right now it's over on the left side. You know, you can try different things and see where it works, but practice predominantly putting your subjects at the intersections of the rule of thirds. The second main point of composition deals with perspective. And a good way to think of the term perspective is kind of the different angles or the way that you can frame a shot. So for example, when you're watching a dialogue between 2 people, where the cinematographer chooses to put the camera, whether it be above the subject or below the subject or right at eye level, it all conveys something very different to the audience, whether that be who has the power in that conversation, if they're equal. A number of things can be conveyed by where you place the camera. So here's a couple examples of a normal scene that is shot from different perspectives and will help to bring something different to us as the audience. The next thing we want to talk about is perspective. And so a lot of this has to do with the angle or how you choose to shoot a scene. So no doubt you've probably seen hundreds of this same picture right here. Somebody has a dirty sink, a dirty kitchen. that is my dirty kitchen that I have not cleaned up, but you've no doubt seen this scene before. And in making movies, there's so many times where we are telling part of a story that everyone has seen countless times. And so the struggle that we run up against as filmmakers is how do we make that interesting? And this is where the second rule, perspective, comes into play. So rather than just having this scene right here where it's like, oh, it's a dirty sink and we see it and it's all great, perspective would say, move the camera to different places to create different interest in the scene. So if we shoot from overhead, it feels a lot different than if we shoot it straight on and back. Or if we come over to the side and we get down here like this, all of a sudden we have a very different perspective. And so a lot of filmmaking is looking for these different changes in perspective. The perspective changes help us a lot in feeling like something is different. See, all of a sudden, when I come over here and I shoot from this way, you do see the dirty sink, but you also see the counter that is in disarray. You're getting a little bit of real-life Corey right here. But it brings a different sense to the film. Like if a short film opened with this and we saw this kitchen in disarray, it's a very different feeling and it's a more compelling shot. There's more things going on here than if we started with this scene where we started at the beginning. So it's kind of a little hands-on view of perspective in action. So look for good perspective, look for different angles and things when you are shooting your movies. The third point for upping your composition game deals with the idea of depth. So one of the struggles that we face as photographers and cinematographers is that when people are looking at our end products, our photos or our movies that they're watching, they see them in a plane of 2D. It's hard to convey, like, you know, reaching out to somebody in a video or in a picture. It's just hard because it's like they're looking at something that's two-dimensional. So a way that we can help to enrich and deepen what we're showing people is to expose them to depth in our pictures and in our movies. So a great way to do this is if you're shooting on a DSLR to go for this idea of shallow depth of field, which I'll talk about more here in a second. And even if you don't have a DSLR, there's lots of things that you can do, like shooting through things and other stuff that I will demonstrate that will really help you to get that deeper, rich sense. And we come to our last stage, which is depth. In photography and videography, like I mentioned, we struggle with the idea of conveying 3D space on a 2D plane. And so one of the ways that we can get around this is that we can do things to add depth to our shot. Now I'm shooting on a DSLR camera, but this is something that you can do on a lot of cameras, but DSLRs are notable for their ability to create something that's called a shallow depth of field or a bokeh effect. So we have the Spider-Man mug, you know, it's great, it looks awesome, it's framed pretty well. But if you can look in the background, you can see that you can also see my fridge and you can see my window, but they're also kind of thrown out of focus. And by choosing to shoot down this hallway as opposed to, like, you know, over here or putting Spider-Man mostly in the frame, I get to see that there's other things happening in the frame. And right now I have a pretty tight focal length. If I zoom in, you can see that there's more of that shallow depth of field going on. And so when I change the focal length, you can see that there is other things behind the mug, and it adds a sort of richness to the shot, as opposed to it just being a flat shot. You know, if I pull out back here, and everything is just in focus, really. You don't really get that shallow depth of field effect. Another way that you can add depth to your shots is if you're shooting, like, something indoors, there's a lot of doorways or walkways or something like that, you can shoot through things. So right here I've got a doorway into my office, which is a little bit of a mess right now. But you can see I can increase the focal length and I can either put the focus on the door and I see that there's a room there a little bit out of focus, or I can go in and get focus on the room and see that this door is here. And so I very clearly see the differentiation between the space here. And I feel that depth. So when you're shooting stuff, look for opportunities, look for things that you can do, that you can shoot through to add depth to your shots. So guys, those are my 3 tips on how to up your composition game. So hopefully the next time you go out to film something, you can think through these ideas of rule of thirds, perspective, and depth, and stretch yourself a little bit to get different angles, different shots, different framing of things in a way that you hadn't gotten before. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more weekly content that I will be bringing you, and until next time, get out there and keep making movies.